Somewhere in Hollow County, there's a road that doesn't always lead back out. This is a journal that was found, written by a man on the one night his usual shortcut didn't work. He kept writing until he ran out of road. I'm writing this down because I can't drive out, and I've stopped believing I'm going to. The road in was 9 minutes off the state route. 9 minutes down the county road, the turn at the dead silo, and then the town. Coming back, I've been driving for what my dashboard says is 2 hours, and the silo hasn't come, and the state route hasn't come, and the mile markers on the shoulder are counting the wrong way. Up. When you're leaving a place, the numbers should fall. Mine climb. So I'm going to write it while my hand still writes it the way I want it to. Start to finish. Hopefully someone finds it and knows what happened. It was the storm that put me here. I'm a merchandiser for Big Sandy Superstore. Not the ones in the cities. My territory is the small stores, the ones an hour past the last exit anybody's heard of, where the manager is glad to see a face and the seasonal set is 3 weeks late going up. I'd finished a reset 2 towns back, left the store dark behind me at 8:45, and I had empty fixtures rattling in the back of the van and a long straight run home ahead of me, and I wanted my own bed. The rain came all at once, like a sheet dropped over the windshield. The wipers couldn't keep the glass clear. I could see maybe 2 car lengths of yellow line, and then nothing. And the state route out there has no shoulder to speak of, and a drop on the right side. So when the sign for the county road came up in the headlights, I took it. It's a shortcut. I'd taken it before, in daylight, hauling a load down to a store that closed 2 years ago. 9 minutes and you come out the far side onto a better road. Everybody who drives that country knows it. The van started acting up before the town. It could have been the water. Old vehicle, hard rain, and the radio went first. It had been off, playing nothing. Then all at once it was playing everything. I don't know how to describe it. Every station at once. A ball game and a weather reading and a church choir and a woman reading numbers, all stacked on top of each other, all coming through clear. That's not how radios work. When 2 stations fight, you get noise. You don't get both. I got all of them. And under it, threaded through it so quiet I decided I'd imagined it, a kid's voice. I couldn't make out a word, but it was in there. I smacked the dash. I turned the dial and it didn't change anything. Then the engine coughed and the dash lights dimmed and I thought, great, the whole electrical's going, and I took my foot off the gas and let it coast. The radio and the lights and the engine all went out together, and I rolled to a stop at the edge of a town with the rain coming down on the roof like gravel. I sat there a second thinking about the radio, about the whole system dying at once and the radio being the first thing to go. The alternator was on its way out. Everything had one reason, and the reason was the van. I got out to look at it. If I'd stayed in the van, I'd have stayed in the van. But you get out to look. That's just what a person does. So I got out into the rain and lifted the hood. And that's when I heard her.
There isn't the Big Sandy Superstore here.
Flat. A little girl's voice, clear across the rain, from up the street where the town was. Not calling for help, not scared, just telling me, the way you'd tell somebody they'd parked in the wrong lot. A child's voice, out in that. 10 o'clock, that rain, a dead-looking town. You don't think. You turn toward it. Then the words caught up. There isn't a Big Sandy Superstore here. She'd named the company like it was painted on the side of my van, except it wasn't. And the van was behind me and dark, and she was up the street ahead of me. She'd said it like she knew what I did, like she knew the only reason a man would stop in a town was to put a store in it, and she was saving me the trouble. She was standing at the mouth of the main street. I could see her because there was a little light somewhere behind her, a window maybe, enough to make her a shape. A girl, 7 or 8, in a summer dress, and the rain was coming down on the whole street, on the road and the roofs and me, hard enough to hurt, and it was coming down all around her and not on her. I could see it. The dress wasn't wet. Her hair wasn't down in her face the way a kid's hair gets. She stood in it dry, like she was standing in different weather than the weather I was standing in. I told myself I had to be mistaken. It was pouring and she was 30 feet off, and there was 1 bad window's worth of light. A thing like that at 30 feet in the rain, I couldn't have seen clear. Then she turned and walked up the street, unhurried, and I went after her. There was a child walking away into a dead town in the dark. I went. At first, it was just a bad town to walk through. That's all it was. A town that's been left goes to pieces in a way you have to pick your way through. And this one had been left a long time. A porch had come down across the first side street, so I went around. The next street ran up into a slide of kudzu and fallen brick, so I went around that. There was standing water at the low points, deep enough to go over my boots, so I stepped wide. Nothing in any of it a person couldn't explain. I was following a kid through a ruin, and the ruin was in my way, and I went around it. And the whole time she was ahead of me, the same distance she'd been at the start. I noticed that without letting it mean anything. I'd walk faster and she wouldn't be closer. I'd nearly jog a few steps and she'd be exactly as far up the street. Never running, never hurrying. Just staying ahead the way the moon stays ahead of a car. A kid who knows a town can keep a lead on a man who doesn't. I told myself a lot of things. I called out to her, asked her name, asked where her family was, told her I'd help her, told her to stop. She didn't answer any of it. She just went up the street, and I went after, and the town came apart around us in the rain. I came back to the intersection the first time and thought I'd gotten turned around. It was a real crossing, a proper one, the middle of the town, where it had been a town. 4 corners. And on the corners were the buildings you'd want. A squat brick one with a faded star and the word sheriff still ghosted over the door. A church, white once. A store, Hex, a real store, or it had been. Glass front, the kind of place with a phone. Every corner of that crossing was a place a man in trouble would go, and I stood in the middle of it in the rain, and felt something I'd call relief if I hadn't learned better since. I went to the sheriff's office first. I crossed to it and put my hand on the door, and it opened, and I stepped through out of the rain, and I was standing in a kitchen. Not a sheriff's office, a kitchen. Small, close, the wallpaper coming off the walls in long, wet sheets. A stove gone to rust, a table with 2 chairs. A kitchen in a house. The rain was loud on a roof lower than the roof I'd just been under. I backed out. The sign said, Sheriff, over the door I'd come through. From the outside, it was the brick building with the star. From the inside, it had been someone's kitchen. I went to the church. The church door opened on the same kitchen, same peeling paper, same rusted stove, same 2 chairs. The second one pushed out a little from the table like somebody just got up from it. I hadn't crossed the intersection. I'd walked from one corner to the other, gone in a different door, and come out in the room I'd just left. The store then, the store with the phone. I could see it through the glass front, on the wall by the register, the old kind with the cord. I went in. Kitchen. The phone was gone and the stove was there and the second chair was pushed out from the table, and I stood in it with the water running off me onto the floor. Every door in this town opened into this room. Whatever the sign said, whatever the front promised, it was the front of the same kitchen. The kitchen was the only room the town had left. I do this for a living. I set the front of a store so the sign matches what's inside. So a man who came in for a radio ends up walking toward the radios. That's the whole job, the promise on the outside being true to the thing on the inside. And I was standing in a town where every promise was a lie laid over the one true room. And the room wanted me in it, and I went back out into the rain, fast. The girl was in the middle of the intersection, waiting, dry, and up the street past her the way ahead was the only way that hadn't looped me back. I'd gotten close to her, closer than I'd been. She'd stopped at the intersection, and I'd come out of the store fast, and I was almost on her before I could think, close enough to reach. And I said something. I think I said, please, and she turned around. For less than a second, she wasn't a girl. She got big. That's the only way I can describe what I saw. Her shape swelled up out of the small dress, up and wide and wrong, the size of her coming apart, and where the girl had been there was... I've been trying to write this for a while now, and I keep stopping. It was like the radio. When the radio played every station at once, it was that, but to look at. Everything in the one place, all of it torn through everything else, 100 pictures laid over each other so there was no picture at all. A woman's face, a road at night, a church full of people, a ball game, a kitchen and a kid, none of it holding still long enough to be a thing. And the sound of her changed. She'd been quiet. The voice had been a small, flat, quiet thing telling me there wasn't a store here. And it opened up all at once into all of them. Every station, every voice, and they weren't telling me anything now. They weren't saving me the trouble. They wanted. I don't have a better word. The quiet voice had been asking. This was past asking. Then she was a girl again. Dry, small, the same distance up the street. Waiting. I turned and ran back the way I'd come. Toward the edge of town. Toward the van and the county road and out. That was the first thing I did that the town fought me on. Everything before, the porches, the kudzu, the water, the town had let me go around. It had been in my way, but it had let me by. The second I turned for the edge, it stopped letting me. The streets I'd walked weren't behind me anymore. The kitchen was behind every door I tried, and now it was around corners too. I'd turned to head down toward where the van was, and the street would run me back to the crossing, and the water was deeper every time, and the wallpaper smell of that kitchen was on the outside air now, wet paper and rust, and I could hear the house breathing, a furnace sound, a long wet pull and push, though there was no house. There was a street, there was rain. I ran at the edge of that town like a man throwing himself at a wall, and the town put the wall wherever I ran, and the only direction it never blocked, the only way that stayed open and quiet and easy, was up the main street, toward her, toward the center. I understood then that the pieces of the town falling in on me were the town trying to keep me out of the middle of it, and the easy, open way to the middle was the thing that had been walking ahead of me, being kind. I understood it, and it didn't help me, because I couldn't get to the edge, and a man can only throw himself at a wall so many times. And the one door the whole town was holding open was the one I did not want to walk through. And I walked through it. Not because I stopped knowing, because there was nowhere else the town would let my feet go. Then it eased. I let myself hope. And I knew better. And I hoped anyway. The fighting stopped. I came up the main street and the water wasn't over my boots anymore. The streets stopped folding me back. The breathing quieted down. I came around the last bend expecting the crossing and the kitchen, and instead I came out at the far end of the town, and there was the gas station. The last one before the river. Lit up. The canopy lights on and the glass of the little store bright and dry, and under the canopy, out of the rain at last, at the pump, was my van. Running. Headlights on, wipers going, the driver's door open like I'd just stepped out of it, exhaust curling up white into the cold. I'd left it dead at the other end of the town. I knew that. I'd left it dead with the hood up in the dark a mile back, and here it was under the lights, running, pointed at the road out, warm. And I got in it. Because it was my van, and it was warm and dry and running, and the road home was right there in the headlights, and everything behind me was that kitchen and that breathing, and the wall the town kept putting up. And in front of me was my own van and the way home. A man can know a thing is a trap and climb into it anyway, if you make everything else worse than the trap. That's what the town did. It didn't fool me. It made the trap the only warm place left. I pulled out onto the road and pointed the van at home, and I was almost crying with it. The heater on my hands and the wipers going and the road unspooling in the lights. She was in the back seat. I saw her in the mirror and I said what I said, and it's the worst thing in here and I don't understand it. I said, "You warm enough back there, sweetheart? Not far now." Easy. The way you'd talk to your own kid on a long drive home. Like she'd been back there the whole way. Like I'd been driving her home all along and just now thought to check she was warm. I don't have a memory of deciding she should be there. I don't have a memory of being afraid of her being there. I looked in the mirror and there was a little girl in my back seat, and my whole body said, "Of course, we're going home." And I drove. And the radio came on. Not all at once this time. Slow. A song first, coming up out of the quiet under the heater fan. An old one, a man's voice taking the long way home, asking real easy who'd be left to blame once he finally settled down. Like the town had gone looking for the one song that was about me. I even reached to turn it up. Then the other stations came up under it, one at a time. The ball game, and the weather, and the numbers, and the choir, filling in behind the song the way they'd filled in that first time by the town. And I kept driving, and the mile markers on the shoulder went by, and I watched them because I know that road, and they were climbing, going the wrong way. Up. "Almost home," she said behind me. Not flat now, warm, reading it back to me off my own face. And that's when I looked for the silo and the state route, and started to understand that the road wasn't going to give me either one. I don't know how long I've been driving. The road's still going. The markers are past 100 now and climbing, and the song keeps coming back around to the start, like it's the only song there is. The man's still taking the long way home, still asking who'll be left to blame. And the other voices are getting up over it, all of them, every station, the way it was by the town, but louder and closer and inside the car now, and some of them are in my own voice. That's the thing I want to get down while the getting down is still mine. Some of the voices coming up out of the radio are saying things in my voice, things I said. "You warm enough back there?" "Not far now." Already in there with the ball game and the choir, already filed, already one of the stations. She's not in the mirror anymore, she's just the voice now, all of it. The whole radio, and it's not ahead of me, and it's not behind me. He took the shortcut he'd taken 100 times. This time, the road didn't let him back out. Some things don't want your body. They want your voice, and everything you were ever going to say with it, filed away where it can be played back whenever it wants to hear you again. That's where we'll leave it tonight. If this story kept you company out there in the dark, please like and subscribe, and join us for the next journey into Hollow County. Got a story of your own? A shortcut that took longer coming back than it ever should have? Email it to us. We may just tell it here someday. Until then, remember, if you ever leave your car broken down on some dark stretch of road and come back to find it running, lights on, warmed up, waiting for you right where you left it dead, don't get in.